CJ Stroud spoke to the media yesterday. He wants to move on from last week, and I get that. I think most of us want to move on from last week. There's some things we can't forget about last week that are very relevant to this matchup versus the Texans. So CJ himself, he wants to get moving along. I will talk about Laremy Tunsil and the offensive line in general with their pre-snap penalties on the heels of one of CJ's responses. I've got a new frame of mind about all of this. I'm looking at this as an area of opportunity for one young Laremy Tunsil, still relatively young. He's 30 years old, who really could be a Hall of Fame player, has the physical potential to be a Hall of Fame player if he cleans a few things up. And it's more than just the penalties, but it's something that's key and critical to this offense genuinely becoming as potent as it could be. CJ yesterday spoke on what he hopes this team learns from last week.
I do believe we have been putting together really good drives. We just got to stop shooting ourselves in the foot and be disciplined, So once I think we stop doing that, we'll stay on the field, get more points, and just keep driving. Because I do think if we have to be methodical and move one play one at a time, getting 5 here, 4 here, 6 here, whatever the case may be. Like we got to be able to do that and adjust.
Yeah, that was on whether this offense can become what people thought it was going to be, or if there's any frustration that it hasn't. And that goes for last week. They were moving the ball at times, but then things stall out largely when they shoot themselves in their own foot. Just by way of a little bit of work I did this afternoon. 22 drives in the last 2 games. 11 of those drives that didn't result in the score, that were either a punt or a turnover on downs or whatever. There were in 11 of those 22 drives, there was either a sack and or a penalty by the offensive line. So the offensive line is going to be a big theme today. Not just Laremy Tunsil, but the offensive line in general. CJ, of course, would never sell his teammates out. He doesn't point out the offensive line at all. It's an issue. It's a big issue right now. CJ on if it's unfair that Bobby Slowik is getting all this criticism.
There's about 2 to 3 people who get the bullet whenever something doesn't go right. Head coach, coordinator, and a quarterback. And that's a job we sign up for. And, Slow has done a good job of just keeping the head down, working. But we all have faith in him, and we know that he's trying to put us in the best positions, and we got to buy into the system just as much as he has to call good plays. And we're it's not a finished product just because you add good players on the team. It's a work in progress. And
yeah, it's a work in progress, and this offense has not been. I don't want to say the offense we were promised or anything. I think that you very clearly can see what it could be. As far as Bobby Slowik and the play calling, my position now remains the same as it was on Sunday. The specific plays that are called aren't a problem whatsoever if the players would execute. And a lot of that at this point boils down to the run game and pass protection. Certainly, I'm not giving them a pass because the Vikings are such a good defense, because they are a really good defense. But the Packers were able to at least move the ball on the ground versus the Vikings defense. The Texans were unable to move the ball on the ground versus the Vikings defense. The Packers did have issues with those blitzes. Those blitzes they're crazy. The stuff Brian Flores is cooking up right now. It's not just that they're crazy on the whiteboard. It's crazy how well his players execute it. There were times I thought that if given proper protection, or if it wasn't 3rd and 12 after a false start from the offensive line on 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 7, or what have you, that the play calls would have been just fine. It's really, really hard to execute and move the ball down that field on that defense for the Vikings if you're just not dialed in. And team-wide, offense and defense, the penalties this week and the penalties last week, I think we're indicative of a lack of focus. Sometimes penalties just happen. Sometimes they're aggressive penalties. Hey, you get a few PIs. You get a couple holdings. You get an unsportsmanlike conduct or something, which, yeah, good for Daniil Hunter. Or no, it was Mario. Mario Edwards got the good. It was Daniil? Oh, it was Daniil. The aggressive unsportsmanlike. It's an aggressive penalty, but it wasn't a dirty hit or anything like that. It's this pre-snap stuff. Again, 50% of their drives that have failed in the last 2 weeks have been because of either sacks, pass protection, or penalties that contributed to penalties, offensive pre-snap penalties within that last set of downs that either led to a missed field goal, a punt, or a turnover on downs. So unacceptable. Here's where we'll start getting into the good stuff. First, Stroud on what are the keys to getting the offense to move on first and second down so they don't end up in all these third and long situations. They've had almost nothing but third and long. There have been very, very few third and manageable, or God, if I ever find a 3rd and 2 somewhere in a Texans game, I'm going to be so excited.
Just execute. Yep, just execute. And pretty much that's it. Just got to be better on first second down. Kind of said it yourself. So, yep, we're working on it.
Yeah, the execution on first and second down. So I'm going to do something here, not by way of extremely disagreeing with DJ Bieneme or anything, but DJ and I, we see this slightly differently. I'm going to partly agree with DJ. When he first tweeted this out, the 33rd team showed the teams with the lowest pressure, the offensive tackles with the lowest pressure rates headed into week 4. Laremy Tunsil's right there up the stop. DJ says, but penalties. And then he says this, which I agree with the theory to a certain degree, but this theory is not being executed properly. I get the annoyance, but it's really overblown when he's protecting the face of the franchise at an elite rate. Does Laremy have to stop false starting? Yes. Is it worth the trade-off? Absolutely. This is the problem right now. Yes, good offensive tackles are going to try to time the snap count. They're going to try to just have every advantage possible. Sometimes that leads to a false start. So sometimes it's a manageable trade-off. Juwan Taylor last year had the most penalties in the NFL. He had 20 penalties. He had 9 false starts. Laremy right now has 6 through 3 games. It's an unacceptable pace. It's an unacceptable rate. You look at last week alone, in the first 6 series of the game, there were three drives in a row that were done in by offensive line penalties. You had the one where the Texans knocked themselves out of field goal range with 3 straight penalties on the offensive line. Laremy's 4th penalty was declined because it didn't matter. It was an incomplete pass. Then you had, before that, Tunsil's penalty made it a 3rd and 12 after it had been 3rd and 7. That was a false start, I believe. They had to punt. And then, so that was the first one. Then there was the second, which was the 3-4 straight penalties. And then the next drive, Tunsil on a false start made it 3rd and 15 instead of 3rd and 10. Like these are damaging penalties. And again, he's had 2 false starts in every game. He's on pace to obliterate what Juwan Taylor did last year. And I didn't see any other offensive linemen as I was looking at the league leaders in pre-snap penalties that had any more than 8 or 9 false starts. So it's an unacceptable pace. The other thing I would say about Laremy and the false starts and the pre-snap penalties is that, all right, right now, part of the problem is that Juice Scruggs is struggling to make the calls, especially in a loud environment like last week. And it gums up the pre-snap process. Offensive line start getting a little bit antsy. Laremy can't point to that as an issue or a problem because, for one, lots of offensive tackles do that, and they aren't on pace for 18 false starts on the year, twice last year's leader. So there's that. The second is, right now, the most critical thing on the offensive line is getting those young guys on the same page as everybody else. And it's not ideal. It's not perfect, but you can't go into business for yourself and try to keep those good PFF grades and those good pass protection and pressures allowed. You can't let all of those things cloud your vision from the bigger picture was, all right, we got to execute on offense. Second thing is this, and where I disagree with what DJ had said about Laremy and the trade-off being worth it. You cannot ignore run blocking. Like right now, Laremy Tunsil and Titus Howard are doing very well protecting the passer. There have been some glitches in blitz pickup that I don't know if the pressure's allowed tell the whole story. I think there have been some glitches by both those guys in blitz pickup, but 100% they are both, as of right now, mediocre run blockers. I mean, like average run blockers. Not horrible, but not as good as they could be. And certainly Laremy Tunsil. So Laremy, in being one of the best pass protecting blockers in the NFL, that's awesome. It's not helping the offense out right now if you're not equally as good as a run blocker. And he 100% physically is capable of doing it. I just want to see him. Like I just wish he understood that he could be a Hall of Famer, especially if this offense takes off the way it could. I mean, he's 100% physically capable of it, but he does not play with the same level of domination that perennial all pros or that Hall of Fame caliber offensive tackles do. And maybe this is the week he gets religion and figures it out, because time's wasting and the Jaguars are capable of rushing the passer. I know it hasn't looked good for them this year, but they've got pass rushers up front. They've got big defensive tackles. It's not so simple that you're just going to go out and tear them up and carve them up the way Josh Allen did, because the Texans haven't once this year looked like that Buffalo Bills offense. CJ Stroud next on, if wide receiver Tank Dell is unable to play, what will the offense be missing?
We love one of the best receivers in the league to be out there for sure, but, it's always sadly in the league, next man up. Got to find a way to win a football game, you know what I mean? So, we're praying for Tank, hope he's okay, and we know that hopefully he's trending up, but whatever happens, we got to be able to try to win.
Yeah, and one of the questions D'Amico got was whether Tank should have been in the game at that point or not, and D'Amico basically gives the answer he gives in a lot of those situations, which is it's football. Guys are going to get injured. I'm torn on this. I struggle between my old school meathead tendencies and doing maybe the safe thing. I don't want to protect guys with kid gloves, and frankly, there's a certain part of the culture of a team that when I was a player, when a coach gave up on the game, I always looked down on the coach for that. I always felt like, man, screw this. As long as there's any kind of a weird, odd mathematical probability of us winning this game, I don't want to pull up our tents and go home. I just don't want to do it. And I think that's part of this culture of this team, is that you're going to fight and fight and fight. Obviously they pulled CJ for that last drive, but I mean, right now for me, I think what Tank probably really needs to do is start watching some of the old film from the Colts, where you've got great wide receivers, including T.Y. Hilton, who was, I don't put him in obviously with Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, but those guys they did not think they were cowards for trying to avoid contact as much as possible, because it's cumulative, and over the course of a long season, the more hits you take, the more chance there is of getting injured. So not that I'm blaming Tank for getting injured or anything, but I do think that, man, there's times where he could turn down contact, where he doesn't need to he doesn't need to take every hit. And not that I'm absolving anybody else for any injuries that Tank ever gets, but man, he could be really awesome. And I just want to be able to see him complete more games. The other part of it is, all right, who steps in to fill in the gap? I mean, Tank's averaging 3 catches per game right now, so it's not like somebody immediately is going to all of a sudden glaringly jump out. I think most likely it's going to be Xavier Hutchinson gets more snaps and more targets. And a lot of this just comes back to, hey, if the defense is basically conceding the run to you, whether it's Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins along with Tank Dell or not, that is still on paper the biggest threat of this offense. The Jaguars play a lot of man defense. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. But if they play like the other 3 teams have, at times they're just going to concede the run. You got to be able to take advantage of that. You've got to be able to get into third and manageable situations. Stroud on what makes Jacksonville Jaguars defensive end Josh Hines Allen stand out.
I would say just his explosiveness, how he uses his hands, his footwork, and I think, I've only been in the league 2 years, but from when I played him the first time, week 3, just like how he adjusts fast against, a divisional opponent the second time to make more plays, and I kind of jumped out on film for me. So, and I think he does a good job. Even when he doesn't make the play, he's taking 2, he's taking on double teams in the run game, doing things to free up his backers and things like that. So I think Trayvon Walker is a good player as well, and he kind of does the same thing. So, he's explosive, great with his hands, and really just has a mentality like he's not going to stop. Has a really good motor.
The other thing too, so since we're talking about the pass rush, mostly there was what CJ was talking about. The pass protection has been an issue, sometimes individually with the guys on the inside, sometimes with blitz pickup, but also to address a few of the other questions I saw here. okay, why hasn't the offense been more passing centric? Why haven't they taken more shots downfield? Part of it's the coverage. Nico's been really good against zone. Everybody else, it's kind of the defenses are doing what they're trying to do, which is limiting the downfield shots. You know, that you saw last week. They got Stephon Diggs going, but man, it was work every single time. Partly because of how good Flores' defense is, and then you add that on to the fact that CJ was having to make throws with dudes in his face, sometimes because of the blitz, sometimes not, but really nail it into tight windows as linebackers are dropping off the line of scrimmage from their sim blitz positions back to where there's going to be some windows and holes there, but they close quick in that Flores defense. And they were doing that, but then when you're trying to balance things out and run the ball, they were losing a lot of that progress that they're making. And I just don't know if this offensive line is capable of letting CJ back there and cook, spreading the formation out. I know I see a lot of comments about the condensed formations and things like that. Look last week, there were so many times where they had a tight end in the backfield alongside a running back, and you're starting off with 7-man protection to pick up the blitz, to chip, to do all that, and then those guys get out on the routes. If you could trust your offensive line more, maybe against non-Vikings defenses especially, then, yeah, I think you could see more of that. It's just a matter of getting those guys right. And that's everything. I hate to sound like a broken record. Everything at this point comes back to the offensive line. It's very frustrating. I'm a frustrated human being right now on how much confidence CJ has knowing that this team is good against man coverage. I looked at the starting cornerbacks in the league who play the least amount of man coverage by percentage of snaps that they've played or that they've been in coverage. The Texans, all 6 of the guys that the Texans have faced so far were in the top 21 or 22. They've faced a lot of zone, and it gets dicey. There's blended coverages and all that, but they've faced a lot of zone. The Jaguars play a bunch of man. If that benefits one-on-one matchups, if CJ has the time to throw downfield, there is the potential that this is the week the Texans really take off. This Jaguars defense is obviously not as good as that Vikings defense that they saw last week. Here's CJ on that.
Yeah, we're confident in everything, like in zone and man and fire zone, and we've kind of seen it all this year, especially playing against a team that's kind of does what they're gonna do week 1, week 2 with Gus and the coach, and then week 2, and then week 3 against Minnesota, they kind of do everything. So I think we've gotten a good rapport of just like defenses playing is different, but we've more so got zone, so we're willing to play anything. We whatever it is, we got to just find a way to win. So.
Yeah, and it's funny. They're 2-1, but look, we know what it is. They faced 2 bad quarterbacks, and then they faced a reborn Sam Darnold, who looks maybe a little bit slimmer, a little bit more athletic. His hair doesn't annoy me as much as it's amazing how much a guy's punchable face stops annoying you as much when they start demonstrating competence. So I think there are obviously opportunities. I don't think the Texans are going to take this team lightly. It's a divisional matchup where there's usually enough bad blood between individual players on the team that they want to go and exact vengeance. Alshire, who does not shy away from violence, has played against these guys twice last year with the Titans. So I'm looking forward to that. I think as far as what a lot of you guys have said about both Slowick's offense, the play calling, Laremy Tunsil, and or the offensive line in general, this is where I'm looking at it. I really want Laremy Tunsil to take a leap forward in terms of being a genuine leader this week, and that means not hurting your team with false starts. He's got 6. League leader last year had 9. So he's got to reverse course immediately. Whatever the equation is between risk and reward with getting a false start every now and then versus hurting your team when you do, but also being better in pass protection, he's blown that out of the water. That equation has been shot all to hell. All right. That's right up there with the Earth at the center of the universe in terms of theories for the way he's executing it right now. I'm going to do D'Amico a little bit later, and I'm going to run and keep this thing to less than 20 minutes. Thank you, everybody. I have many more thoughts about all of this, but I'm trying not to vent. I'm trying to be positive and move forward with the offensive line. I need them to step forward. Please, if you care about Seth Payne's mental health, please. Oh, where'd CJ go? I thought I had
Funny guy over there, huh?